What's up guys, this is Will from the Game Lounge, and today I wanted to talk about a mini PC that I'm using as a retro games console. This is the Beelink SER5 with an AMD 5800H core Ryzen processor and a built-in Vega GPU. And this base model can be purchased with 16GB of RAM for £280. It's from AliExpress. And for £20 more, you can get the additional RAM. AliExpress for me gave me no issues. This is the box that they sent out. It took about a week to arrive from the UK, and there's various different models. I have the Pro, there's the Max. And for me, if we look at the box here, it's pretty bare bones in terms of what it comes with. So obviously the unit itself, which is extremely small, extremely compact, comes with a power supply. In here you've also got HDMI cable and a wall mount or bracket that can affix it to a TV, etc., which is pretty handy, and some instructions that I've never ever looked at since purchasing it. And this caught my eye because I really wanted to emulate many more modern systems like the Switch, etc. But I wanted something, I didn't want to spend £700-800 on something to run retro games. Having a look at this here, you can see loads of different ports, HDMI display ports, USB ports, and you actually really easily have the ability, if you want to upgrade the memory, you just remove these 4 screws, back comes off, and you can easily have your entire library on this incredibly small device. And for me, that value for money element here is absolutely critical. Yes, you can pay £500, £600, £700 for many PCs, but I really didn't want to do that. And if you see here, it's so small, it's so compact. This is compared to a PlayStation controller. It looks great. Now, when you're getting one of these, personally, I would always pick up one of these small mini keyboards. This was less than £10. It's really like a great thing if you ever want to use this as a media machine. It's clicky, it's got a scroll bar here, which is excellent. And yeah, I thoroughly recommend this model. I'll pop a link in the description. Now, to give you an idea, this is a comparison with an Xbox One X, and you can see it's absolutely tiny, which I personally really love. Now, it's not as powerful maybe as an Xbox One X, but essentially to get going, all you need, you can see it's the size of a controller here. So I've got a controller, I've got the mini keyboard, which is excellent, and I think you've got to include the power brick in terms of the size. Now, I went with Windows 11. It comes pre-installed, so you get the license, which is great. These are also very capable little office and light gaming machines. So squeezing, like I say, much more value into it. SSDs now boot so fast, so you can get a Windows script if you want to boot just straight to your front end if you want to. And there's loads of ways you can tweak things in Windows. This is Launchbox. This is the main front end that I'm using here. I personally think this is the way to go. It's really easy, really quick to set up. It is, unfortunately, if you want the full controller experience, you should use Big Box, which does unfortunately cost money. But when you look at how good it looks, how easy it is to set up and have all of your consoles in one place, I think it's a great thing to look into. There is a free option, and if you want the free option, it's called RetroBat, and that's a free alternative which looks more along the lines of Emulation Station or Batacera. I know people love having the full console experience, and something like Batacera will give that to you. I would recommend, though, keeping Windows in case you want to have, for example, like I say, light office use, email use. There's also a number of PC games that you can run, etc. And you can always get an external drive if you wanted to boot to a front end like Batacera, which is going to give you the full console experience. But for me, these mini PCs, I love the concept. I love the convenience of your entire library in one place with a stylish front end. And this system has been fantastic for me. What I want to do is go through some emulators and show you exactly what this can do. Now obviously this is going to very easily run things like Game Boy, it's going to run Mega Drive, absolutely no problem at all. Your classic 16-bit consoles like the SNES, TurboGrafx are going to be fine, GBA, all of this you can really do on a Raspberry Pi 4, which you can pick up for less than £100 with, you know, the maximum amount of RAM. So that's not going to be the focus of this video. Obviously things like PlayStation emulation, you're going to be able to do it at full 1080p and it's going to look absolutely spectacular, but that's not the focus of why you would spend £300 on a device like this. When we get to the likes of, say, Sega Saturn, this is the first system that really needs a little bit more juice to run. And you can see here from the footage, no issues with the likes of Saturn. I've had a great time reliving some of those great Saturn games through this device. I've got one of the Retrobit Saturn controllers, so it feels really authentic when you play this one. And it's going to be the same story for the Nintendo 64. This is something that will run on a lot of low-end devices, but this is just going to run it as well as you possibly can. Highest resolution that you need, maximum accuracy in terms of emulation accuracy. So N64, again, this isn't going to be the problem. Sega Dreamcast is another one that runs very easily on quite low-end hardware, but you're generally talking about native resolution. Obviously with this system, you know, this is effectively an HD Dreamcast with all the bells and whistles. If you wanted to run the widescreen hacks, etc., you can do this all. No game is going to give you any issues whatsoever. So Dreamcast looks really good through this system. Now this is where things start to get interesting. So PS2 had notoriously tricky architecture. It took developers a long time to actually get up to speed with how this works. And the good news here is that most games I tried ran at least 1080p. Now there were some, you can see here Jak and Daxter, but there were some in particular, Outrun, where I did have to bring it down just to 720p. I'll let you have a look at this footage and you can just see there's some frame drops, and particularly if you watch the timer, it's not exactly in line. There's definitely a little bit of slowdown, even though it looks great. So you are going to have to bring the resolution down on a couple of games, but generally, you know, this cleans up the PlayStation's typically quite blurry visuals and looks really spectacular. So you can see there with Outrun, slight slowdown, simply bringing down the resolution for this particular game, and you can have per game settings will resolve this. So PS2 looks fantastic. So GameCube up next, and GameCube, the emulator Dolphin is now incredibly mature. It's been around for 20 years. It runs everything. Architecturally, the GameCube was not as complex as the PS2, so I had no issues with any game running 1080p. I didn't see a single graphical issue. Everything looked absolutely stunning. So again, not only are you being able to play this, you know, on a retro console-like experience, but you're getting, you know, upgraded resolution, great visuals. It all looks really good. So you're going to have no issues with the GameCube on this device. Xbox up next, and you can see here from the footage, this is using the Zemu emulator, and the resolution is 2x. And I think the Xbox has had an interesting history in terms of its ability to be emulated, and we're just at that phase now where actually you can have a great experience playing classic Xbox games. This is Dead or Alive 3 running at 2x. Most games you're not going to have any issues running at 2x. If we take a look at Panzer Dragoon, this is a slightly more interesting one, and I've deliberately left the resolution to see that there are going to be some games where you are going to see slowdown. This is a really interesting emulator in that actually I tended to get much better performance on Linux than I did on Windows. So you are going to see some slowdown. You know, Panzer Dragoon, for example, looks significantly better If you play it through backward compatibility on the Series X or Series S, it looks really good in 1080p. The good news here is this emulator is in active development all the time. So I think you're going to see performance on the Xbox get progressively better. And if we have a look at, say, Need for Speed Underground, you can see the Xbox really looks great today upscaled. So I'm very hopeful that as this becomes more mature, you're going to get better and better performance out of this unit. We'll just touch on a couple of handhelds now, and PSP again, very mature emulator, PPSSPP here, and this is God of War, which is one of the more taxing games, and there's no problem with adding this 3x, 4x, 5x res. It runs really well. So, you know, the PSP was already in a widescreen ratio, so when it's upscaled and blown up, the games look really spectacular through this device on a TV. So highly recommend that you try this one. It's going to look great. And similarly with 3DS, you're going to see really good performance. Now, I have found with Citra certain games I've really struggled to get running. They seem to be back in active development a lot more now. Definitely things went quiet, but you can see from the Zelda footage here, you know, when you upscale these games, I mean, this is really looking crisp and looking great. And 3DS is going to be no problem playing on this device. Now, the Nintendo Wii, for me, is a really interesting one. You know, it uses Dolphin, the same emulator as GameCube. It's similar hardware, and obviously the games, they all run great. This is an HD Wii. Now, the most important thing for me actually has been the control scheme. And if you look at, you know, using the Wiimote, I think if you want to have a Wii console experience, you have to be able to play with the Wiimote. And thankfully, the built-in Bluetooth here, I've had all sorts of issues with playing Wii in the past using USB Bluetooth. So there's always some concerns. Thankfully, this almost feels like one-to-one, not just for games like Mario Galaxy. If we take a look at, say, Wii Sports using the motion controls, it felt exactly the same as playing a real Wii, with the one benefit of it looking so crisp on the screen. So, you know, you can literally pair this up. Okay, that means that you won't get the sound. You can buy a Wii bar, you can have wireless ones, or you can buy a Dolphin bar, which is slightly more expensive. But that basically makes this the definitive way to play the Nintendo Wii. So next up, we have Xbox 360, and when I look at this, I'm actually surprised at how well this runs. I'm using the Xenia emulator. Now, this is not a particularly mature emulator. There's still a long way to go. Even just playing Sonic Unleashed here, I saw texture explosions and various minor issues, but this is something that's going to improve over time. And if you look at the performance here, a lot of games are very playable. So as time goes on, I think you're going to see better and better performance. One thing I did notice is the more you push this system, and actually one of the drawbacks, I think, is the fan noise. If we check out Halo here, you can see in Halo 3, I've gone off screen to just give you an idea of how loud the fan is. So it personally isn't a problem for me, but I think some people would find the loudness of that fan a little bit frustrating, I would say. But overall, I think the Xbox 360 on this system is a pretty good experience. You know, once you start getting to these systems, this is not a reason I would buy the system. I would look at anything above Xbox 360 as a nice to have as opposed to a reason to buy it. But, you know, many games are becoming playable all the time through this emulator. So definitely take a look. Here's the GoldenEye remake, the unofficial leaked version, which is probably the best version of this game. And this is a great way to play it. I had a great time. So 360 certainly is something that people should be feeling they definitely will be able to play in the future on this device. Now, the same is definitely not true about the PS3. Now, our PCS3 is a pretty well developed advanced emulator, and obviously the PS3 architecture, like the PS2, is a lot more difficult. So the emulator needs a lot more juice. That being said, you've got Ratchet and Clank here. It's very playable. The frame rate's a little bit inconsistent. There's some issues, but there's going to be games on the PS3 that you definitely can play. Heavy Rain is another example that worked extremely well. Also, I was playing some Little Big Planet. So there's loads of games that are going to work, Demon Souls, etc. But it's not going to be a great PS3 system. Uncharted for me was chugging along at 20 frames per second. So if you're looking in the budget end of these mini PCs, I recommend this, but PS3, it's a nice to have if a game works again, and not something that you should be really buying as a feature. The Wii U, on the other hand, runs fantastically well. We're looking at Mario Kart here. I had zero issues with this, and it looks great. Obviously, you're going to have a drawback that you don't have a gamepad, and that's something worth considering, but most of the games don't really need the gamepad, at least the games worth playing. So as a Nintendo system, this really covers every Nintendo system that you can play. And that brings me really to the big one for me and the big selling point of this system, which is Switch emulation. Now, the Switch is a handheld system. Battery life is always going to be a problem. And don't get me wrong, you can replace the batteries. But I think with all handhelds, it's so important that we preserve these systems because it's just that extra level of failure. And if you look at the Switch here, I was massively impressed with how these play. Now, this is Mario Odyssey. This is the first time that I've played it, so you're going to see a lot of shader caching, which can stutter a little bit, but if we look at this here, it gets smoother and smoother as you play it, and I've purposely left this at its worst, and yet I had no issues playing Mario Odyssey. It didn't feel any different from when I actually played it originally on the Switch. It felt really good. You can use the Switch gamepad, which connects via Bluetooth, which basically makes you feel like you're playing a standalone Switch, which I think really, really looks incredible. This is Kirby, again, another game that is really, really quite intensive in terms of shader cache. I had no problems with it, though. I played this for many hours in the end, just really, really got into it. So as a Switch system, this is a great alternative if you don't want to be using the handheld all the time, if you don't want to be constantly having to utilize that battery, then this is really, really, really impressive. And for the money as well, to be sub £300 and able to run Switch is really, really impressive indeed. Final game I'm going to show you is one of my favorite games, and I think a game that is a little hidden gem and a little underappreciated, and that's the cruising game, which looks fantastic. I just think this game looks so good, so much fun. It's like playing a classic 90s arcade game. And again, playing this one, I've got this one on the Switch, of course. It was no different to playing on native hardware. I genuinely could not tell the difference. So this system, and the real selling point, I think, is definitely Nintendo Switch compatibility. And then, of course, it's a PC under the hood. So you're going to have a full Steam, Epic Games, EA, whatever libraries you have, these are going to work. And I think, okay, it's not probably going to run Cyberpunk, but I've got some footage here of Tomb Raider. That ran absolutely fine. Most games from the previous generation, I ran Control. That looked great. I ran Witcher 3. That looked great. So there's the added benefit of just having this as a class, you know, your entire PC game library also available to you. So I'm a huge fan of this. I think this is definitely something that if you're looking for something that will have your entire back catalogue and library available on one device through HDMI, many times enhanced, this is definitely something that people should check out. Hope you've enjoyed the video. As always, like, subscribe, let me know if you want more content like this, and have a great day.